welcome back. This is Doug Wheeler. Thank you for returning to another episode of From the Belly. If you've been listening to the last few that we've done, you know the new emphasis of this podcast is why not church, or maybe why church? And today I have the honor of meeting with my friends and people that I worship with. And I'm really, really grateful for that. We'll tell you in a minute about what we're up to. But this podcast is a little unique because we're going to be talking specifically about the American Baptist Bicentennial Conference, which all these good people attended. So we're going to be chatting about that. I want you to know that we have a twofold purpose in doing this, and maybe there's other things that will come from it. One is we wanted one source for people in our congregation that wanted to hear from this cohort of people, hear the story in kind of a condensed form. And I'm sure people will listen. And then for anybody else who is interested in the denomination, what's happening, the people that I've got on the podcast today, they have a long history of being in this denomination. And then we'll talk about what's unique about American Baptists up against, at least where I come from. Hopefully this won't offend anybody, but I grew up in Southern Baptist territory, and there's some differences, even though each church is autonomous. And by the way, I'm with some long-standing American Baptist folks. If I get anything wrong, please correct me for the sake of me and whoever's listening. So today, we've yet to have Jim Kalinsky join us. I think Jim's having some technical problems, and so he'll drop in at some point. Erika Marksbury, Joanne and Larry Sims, and Don Watson, and that was in alphabetical order. So what I'd like to do, and I've learned this firsthand, I used to read the bio of people, and then I would sometimes look at the person I was talking to, and they actually looked bored. They looked bored. And so what I do is I let people share what they want to share about their own bio that you think inspires not only you, but other people listening. Because that long list of things, again, they looked bored. I wasn't bored, but they were. So I think we're going to start. We can't start with Jim, alphabetical order. So we will start with Erika, and we'll have Erika tell us what her function is in the church, and a little bit, maybe just briefly, about her story with First Baptist Church of Mcminnville. That's probably important for me to say. This is First Baptist Church of Mcminnville, where I currently just became, after 6 or 7 months of attending, I became an official member, and I'm honored to say that. So Erika, welcome. Thank you for being here. Tell us who you are, what you do, and your experience of First Baptist Church of Mcminnville.
Thanks, Doug. It is an honor to be here. I'm the senior pastor at the First Baptist Church of Mcminnville. I've been there almost 10 years. Joanne Sims, who's also on this podcast, chaired the search committee that invited me to come. And I just, I was living suburbs of Kansas City, working at a church there that was really beautiful and compassionate and progressive, but also just kind of looking for something a little different. And so met Joanne and this committee and fell in love with the church at Mcminnville and just the ways that they love this community, the ways that they try and live out their love for God in this community. So it's been really a joy and a privilege to be with them. The congregation is full of folks who are like curious and ask big questions and want to be responsive to what's happening in the community around them. And so it's nice to walk alongside them. I remember when I was interviewing, one of the members of the committee said something like, well, we've been around a long time and we kind of know what we're doing. So what do you think you could bring to us? And it was sort of an intimidating question. But in Baptist, there's kind of a commitment to a low church way of being, that the hierarchy is not real strong in this tradition. And so I was able to tell him, like, I just am inspired by you all and want to walk alongside you. And that's been such a gift for this decade.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you didn't grow up American Baptist. And I think Jim's dropping in. Jim, welcome back.
Hey, Jim.
Hi, Jim. Thanks for dropping in. We let everybody know. We're about 3 or 4 minutes in, Jim. What we've done is, and we already introduced you, but as I told everybody, I don't read people's bios because many times they looked bored on the screen. So we'll have you share in a minute your experience at First Baptist Church and your role there, if you will. So we're going to move right now to Joanne and Larry. And You're on mute, so if you want to unmute and then tell us about you and your story.
Okay, I'm Larry Sims. I started out life in Eastern Washington, going to an American Baptist church there, and sometimes refer to myself as a lifer, having been in the church. One of the things that I think is important about the American Baptist in me is that when people ask if I'm part of an organized religion, I say, no, I'm an American Baptist. And so that's kind of where I grew up, in knowing that the autonomy of the church and of the individual is very important. Personally, I grew up as the class nerd and went off to college. I got a degree in chemical engineering, went off to work in the nuclear business, doing research in that. And that took about 7 years of my career. I got laid off, went back to graduate school, got a degree in environmental engineering, and that's where I spent most of my career. In retirement, we were looking for a smaller community to live in, and wound up in Mcminnville, Oregon. This was part of a study that we had done of several small communities, and Mcminnville stood out as not only being a nice community to live in, but one that had a small college and had a church that we thought we could get into. Joanne and I have been kind of on the leading edge of a lot of issues. And so
that's saying something. That's true.
Yeah. And so, well, for example, we were members of a church that was not doing very much, and we decided to sell that church and go out of the church business. And then we used the money from the sale of that church to start a center for runaway kids. And just recently, that organization celebrated its 50th anniversary. So we felt very comfortable in that. And some people don't feel comfortable in selling a church, but we did. So we put ourselves into First Baptist, where we are on the edge of a lot of very progressive ideas. And that's why we feel very comfortable there. The community is always asking questions about ourselves and what we're doing. So that's where I am, and I feel good about it.
Thank you, Larry.
So I'm Joanne, and I'm not a lifer, American Baptist. And so I've had experience with the Methodist Church and with the Presbyterian Church, and they were all, I would say, rather standard experiences. At one point, when I was in high school, I signed up for a youth camp in the summer, and in the interim, I was dancing with a touring group, and I was chosen to be a part of the touring group doing folk dancing around the United States. And so I was very conflicted because I wanted to go to camp and I also wanted to dance with this group. And so I asked the pastor to my home, and the pastor essentially said that, well, if I wanted to find God, I would have to come to summer camp. And I said, what? You mean God wouldn't be with me if I was dancing around the U.S.? And he says, that's right. If you want to find God, you have to come to camp. And I said, what? I said, well, my God is much bigger than that. I said, I'm not putting my God in a camp box. And so I danced. So anyway, so I've always been kind of personally searching for how I can live out and demonstrate and model and help other people find their center and their alignment with God. And to me, it is important to, well, let me put it this way. I think it really matters what you do. And when you have a sense of God's presence, that presence helps guide you of what to do. So I was excited to find a church that would accept me. Anyway, so it's a pleasure to be a part of this group today. Thank you.
I like that spunk in that question that you reported that you said to the pastor 2 times. What? I like that. Dad. And I think you definitely still have that spunk. What? Jim, is everything going okay with your audio?
No, I can barely hear what's going on.
I'm trying to.
We're trying to hook up a
connect a
speaker to it to see if we can get some.
Sorry,
That's
I'm
okay.
really trying.
If that's fine, guys. If you can find your mute button or some way to silence your mic, that would be helpful
Okay, yeah, I'll
to
mute it.
us while you're trying to work on that. That would be extremely helpful. We'll let you guys continue to work. The best podcasts that I listen to sometimes don't even edit out the technical challenges because they say, you know what, this is what we're all up against in life anyways. We're always struggling with technical challenges. Let's kick it to Don. Don Watson, tell us about your experience of being an American Baptist and your current role, and then whatever else you want to talk about.
Thank you, Doug. It's a pleasure to be with the group today. I am one of those lifers born into a family that was already a second generation active in American Baptist churches, although years ago it had a different name. Ended up attending Linfield now University in McMinnville, Oregon, where our First Baptist Church is located. It was founded by Baptist pioneers. The connection between Linfield and American Baptist is pretty minimal at this point, but historically it was quite significant. While being at Linfield, my reason for coming was to get a degree and to have a teaching certificate because I really wanted to be in the classroom. Even as a 21-year-old, I really felt that's what God was calling me to do. I wasn't interested in pastoral ministry, but I was really interested in being a face and the voice and actions of Jesus in a public classroom, respectfully. So math education was my doorway into that. While attending Linfield, I did hang out with the good folk at First Baptist Church of Mcminnville. As my parents had done in the 40s, I was there in the 60s, early 70s, and then my brother did the same thing a few years after me. So have kind of a family connection to our local church here, even though I grew up 25 miles away in Salem, Oregon. My current role at the church is multiple hats. My official role on the church board is treasurer, and something that I do that provides a lot of joy and challenge is to guide a group called STARS, serving those around us. And we provide a breakfast on Monday and Friday mornings, along with personal items and conversation and friendship and a few laundry cards and some clothes. And it's just, we're in year number 11, and it's been quite the joy. One other thing I will add, while I was a student at Linfield, I knew that when I graduated, my student deferment during Vietnam was going to be gone, and that it was a big struggle for me. But after a year, I decided I would apply for conscience objector status, which I did receive over time, and did alternative service before I started my 31 years as a middle school math teacher. And that was tons of fun. I'll end there.
All right. And your lives are full of so many more stories than what you've shared. But we've got those boundaries of time, not as a community of friends, but for the podcast. So I think we'll shift now to kind of the core emphasis is why we decided to do this. And I mentioned that early on. Jim, if you've been able to sort out where you've got a better speaker, can you hear me better
Hold
now
on.
as you unmute it? Can you hear better now, Jim? Are you able
Yeah.
to hear better now?
No, I can't hear very well,
Fantastic.
but
Okay, we hear you really well, so this will be great. I'll speak up. Tell us a little bit about your experience of being an American Baptist and how you ended up at First Baptist Church.
Okay, I don't know. I can't tell you what's been said before, so I guess you'll have to edit
that's
on
fine.
it. Okay. Well, I was born into an American Baptist church. I remember sitting on my mother's lap when I was an infant, and so I was there even before, and I've always been an American Baptist. My initial introduction to life and the family was basically an experience that somehow I feared God because we had an evangelistic meeting, and the evangelist said that if you died tonight and you didn't make it known that Jesus was your savior, that you'd be shoveling coals for the devil for eternity. And I was 8 years old, and it was rather traumatizing for me. And when they gave the invitation and they sang Just As I Am, I ran down there and I said, please don't send me there. And so it was kind of a traumatic beginning, and I've been working my whole life to have a different understanding of God, and that God is about love, and God is about inclusion, and God is really not about being angry or wrathful towards us. And so I graduated from Linfield College, now university, 1972. I went directly to seminary in at the American Baptist Seminary of the West in Covina, and I was there. I completed nearly 3 years. In the last year, I had a meltdown because I had suffered emotional abuse as a child, and I didn't realize that I really didn't know what my own identity was. And so I took a detour and left seminary and got a job as a computer person at Whittier Hospital and worked my way up to senior programmer analyst. So I was there 7 years, and then I went back to seminary, went through what's called the Center for the Ministry, and my wife and I made a decision that we would transition back into ministry. And so when I called the seminary, they said I'd been out for 7 years. So the record showed that I needed 12 more units. And so they said, we recommend 20. And so I did that. It was a very hard, long process for me to get there. I should have graduated in 1976, and it was 1983 before I finished. And then I became associate pastor in First Baptist Church of West Covina, and then for was 12 and a half years. And then I went to First Baptist Church of National City, and I was there 21 and a half years and retired, and came back to Oregon and affiliated again with First Baptist Church of Mcminnville. And I'm very, very happy there. It's a very inclusive fellowship, and I'm very grateful to be there.
Jim, thank you. Thank you to all of you. I read recently an author put it this way: our lives are so storied. Our lives are chock full of stories. So we live storied lives. And my bet is, even though you all know each other quite well, you might have learned something even listening to a new presentation of somebody's story, and we still are getting to know each other. And that just goes on and on. So that's a beautiful thing. So let's shift over to this biennial experience that you had in Omaha, Nebraska between July the 3rd and July the 6th of this year. So you're about 3.5 weeks out. And I wanted to get this podcast done in July. So we're doing it. We're squeezing it in. Let me ask this. Please put yourself on mute when you're not talking. That would be great. That'd be helpful. And then when I address a question to maybe all of you and whatever, and if you have forgotten to unmute, I'll remind you because I see that. So for people that don't know what the biennial is, because I sure didn't, because to be honest with you, I didn't know what American Baptists were about. And when I attended the church 7 months ago, my experience a few weeks in was, I don't care what denomination this place is from. I think I want to be here. And then I learned about the 4 Baptist freedoms. So I'm going to ask Erika to go over those, if you're cool with that, as you went over them with me. And just to let you all know that don't know about the 4 Baptist freedoms, Erika shared them, did a beautiful job, I think within 3 to 5 minutes, something like that. And I just said, check all those boxes for me. I check all those boxes. I have no issues with that. That was prior to me becoming a member. So would you go over those, Erika, for us? The 4 Baptist freedoms. I'd never even heard that language.
Sure. Yeah, and sometimes they're called the 4 fragile freedoms because they're difficult, right, to hold together. Baptists are non-creedal people, and so there's nothing that we would recite every week. There's no tenets that we say we all must believe the same thing about the virgin birth or the resurrection or any of that. But what we have are these 4 freedoms: Bible freedom, religious freedom, church freedom, and soul freedom. And they are what sort of center us as Baptists and create kind of a covenant of like how we will live together and honor each other. So religious freedom is your basic separation of church and state. Baptists aren't ever gonna advocate for mandatory prayer in school or for anyone to be coerced any direction religiously. So we we share that with lots of folks. Bible freedom is the idea that no one interpretation kind of wins the day when we're reading scripture, but that all of us are invited to read this sacred text. All of us are invited to think about it together, to be in conversation about it, to do our own study and work and discern kind of what it means for us, and then to bring that interpretation into conversation with one another, so that our own understanding of the text might be deepened by each other's understandings also. Church freedom means that each local congregation gets to determine its own ministry and focus. Don mentioned the Stars Breakfast program. That's a ministry that was born from this congregation because of a need that folks noticed kind of right outside the door here. And church freedom says that local church leadership, local congregations have the authority to make decisions like that about how their ministry will be focused. And then soul freedom is an acknowledgement that your understanding of God, of the divine, of the sacred might be different than mine, and that our understandings are shaped by our contexts and our experiences. And maybe for some folks, it's really meaningful to call God Father. And maybe for some folks, that's not an image of the divine that they can embrace. And so maybe something like creator or friend, or maybe there's not a name for God that works for some people. And soul freedom says that we will honor that about each other. We will respect each other's understandings and conceptions of the divine. And I think all of these freedoms together work with the basic premise that like we are richer and full. Our understandings grow richer and fuller when we bring them into community. No one of us has the whole truth about God, but we vow to journey together and learn from one another, honor each other's kind of freedom of understanding and interpretation, and trust that we can hold the tension that might arise there, because being in community is a call.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for asking.
Yeah. So let's jump right to the biennial. I'll introduce it the way it shows up according to ChatGPT. It's like, well, what's the biennial? And here's what ChatGPT says. Okay. The ABCUSA, American Baptist Church USA, will be celebrating its biennial mission summit in Omaha, Nebraska from the 3rd to the 6th of July. This event themed Come Seek Living Water will feature worship, learning, fellowship, and renewal. And then it goes on to say that the purpose, if you will, or maybe the primary purpose, is to connect new leaders and those new to the denomination with the resources and community of ABC USA. So I'm sure you all know that. So let's approach this with these four fragile freedoms. So first of all, somebody tell me how many people roughly. We'll ask Don because Don's the numbers guy. I think I asked Don this anyways. How many people ended up, would you say, at this biennial conference that happened over a 3 or 4 day period of time? How many people were roughly there? Don, you need to unmute. Yep, that's good.
Yeah, I'm not sure I saw an official number, but I would say in the realm of 800 or so.
Okay. And this is essentially across the USA.
And
North
Puerto
America.
Rico.
And Puerto Rico. Great. Go ahead, Don.
Plus, we have relationships. We have a group called International Ministries that work outside of the U.S. and Puerto Rico, supporting partners in those countries. And a lot of times they have folk that come to a biennial. So you'll see people that live outside of those two areas. And then we have a group, American Baptist Church of Home Mission Society, that supports work that's going on in the U.S. and Puerto Rico. And you will see in leadership of a big event like this, there's usually folks from those different groups. Plus, we have American Baptist has, I think, how many is it? 34 or 35 regions, that some are states and some are multiple states. And they send leaders to this kind of event. So,
Okay.
number-wise, that would kind of cover it.
Okay. What was your experience of this event? Oh, Joanne? Joanne's got her hand up.
when Don was describing kind of, who was there, and that the reaches of American Baptist USA go beyond the United States, I just wanted to share one of a real powerful experience that I had at the biennial.
Great.
And it has to do with that very item. So I had the opportunity, they have a large exhibit area. And so I went over and I was looking at the exhibit area, and I met, and her name is Faye Carol Yarborough, and she's from South Africa. And so here's her picture. And I was really intrigued that she was from South Africa because in 1997, I was an ambassador for the U.S. Department of Education, and I was there just after the revolution, and I was asked to assist South Africa in creating a curriculum that was based in participatory democracy. And so when I saw her, it was so exciting for me to connect with her again. And she had on her table this beautiful flag of South Africa, and turns out that she's part of the international missions, and so she is serving in South Africa and representing American Baptists. And I was just so thrilled, and we just chatted about what she'd been doing and why we were connected, and it was just a really precious, wonderful reminder to me that not only does the American Baptist denomination, work with missionaries around the world, but they're in South Africa. I didn't know that. So that was a beautiful and strong connection. And I wanted to buy her apron, and the apron that I just showed you. And so she said, well, it's $20. And I said, well, they told us that this was a cashless biennial. And so I didn't bring any cash with me. And so I said, so I gave her my card, and she said, so I'm sorry, I don't know what to do with that. I'm not set up with that. And she says, here, just take the apron. And she says, we'll figure this out. And so I have the apron, and I actually didn't figure it out until we got home, and I connected with International Ministries and wrote some checks and all of that. And so eventually, I'm sure she'll get her $20. But anyway, that was just a really special example of connecting, not only personally, but denominationally. And even I didn't know American Baptist USA was in South Africa.
That's
Thanks.
beautiful. Thank you, Joanne. Other stories, you could just raise your hand and we'll just go. Other stories that stand out to you that you probably won't forget in a few years, and you might not forget them forever. You'll just be like, well, that was an important engagement. That was an important conversation. That left an imprint on me. Other stories. Jim, make sure that you unmute.
Well, as a person who is somewhat handicapped because of a medical mistake about 4 years ago, one of the things I will never forget is how people were inclusive. They noticed that I had difficulty walking across the bridge between the hotel and the biennial, and it was a massive place, and people that were delegates and attendees, as well as security people, just reached out to me and said, I use a walker, and they would say, can you sit on that thing? If you can, we'll push you to where you need to go. And I was really grateful, because it would have been tough for me because it's a massive place. So that was a great joy. But I think my highest joy, I went because I wanted us to be more inclusive, especially of people who are marginalized. I think gay people fit that category, and I think we have struggled with that for a number of years. And in 1992, we made a statement as a denomination that homosexuality was against Christian teaching. And the very next year, we said we need to have continuing dialogue and that was 1993. And this is now 2025. And I went with the idea that it's time to get beyond talking and make some more decisions. And while we didn't update that decision, I think that it's very apparent because the gay group called AWAB, the Association of Welcoming and Affirming Baptists, had a breakfast meeting, and there was over 200 people that came, and many people in denominational leadership were there. And I think it was really exciting to see that even though we haven't changed our statement, we are showing a much more inclusive stance. And I was very proud of our congregation because the 5 delegates that went, we were very proactive in saying that we wanted a more inclusive denomination. And we had a couple of documents that we prepared in advance that were distributed at the meeting. And we have a new president that starts in January, and he has promised to be inclusive and progressive. And so we're very hopeful that there'll be a statement that we can ratify at the next biennial saying that nobody should be excluded from the table for any reason.
Beautiful stuff. Good stuff. Jim, thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Dawn and Erica, stories, experiences, and they don't all have to be great. You know, you might have had a conversation with somebody that it was difficult, and it's hung with you, and you just can't maybe reconcile it or whatever. Dawn.
I like to just add to Jim's comment. We chatted recently that both of us were in attendance at a biennial in Washington, D.C. in the year 2007. And I remember that one quite well, partly because it was in the nation's capital. It was around the 4th of July. In fact, I went to the 4th of July parade while staying there, stayed an extra day. But the group of welcoming and affirming Baptists were not allowed to have a booth in the general area of other folk, and they had to set up outside in the hallways.
I can feel my temperature. I can feel my temperature rising, Dawn, and I'm going to try to push my temperature back down.
Okay.
But I'm internally going, what?
Yeah, 2007, and at that event and other ones, there would be a group of faithful who were there wearing their rainbow colors and supporting love for all, and they let some of us know that they were going to be having a sing-in out in the hallway of the convention center. And I was able to join that group. I wasn't, really officially part of the organization, but I wanted to be there to sing and to have my buttons on. And so to get to this point in Omaha, Nebraska, a fairly conservative part of the country, and to see the progress, even though we don't have that statement yet that Jim is talking about, but the progress and the desire of so many people to say, hey, we were called to love. Let's do it.
Let's see, 25 minus 7, 18 years. Maybe we should do another podcast on how to grow more patient, and you all could work on me. I want to slide something in really quick here. I'll make this brief. Yesterday, I had a conversation with a person that was representing our security system because I've spent about 10 hours trying to, and I really had to push back to say, I pay this amount of money per month and I'm doing all the work. So could you send somebody out? Because I have the plus package. Can't do that, Mr. Wheeler. I'm sorry. So anyways, man, I tell you what, I spent a lot of time, but I spoke to this young woman, and we started a faith conversation. It was amazing. And I said to her, I said, Tanisha, you have been so patient with me. I mean, you didn't interrupt me when I told you that I felt like I was getting a little worked up, but this was not directed toward you, but it's directed toward kind of the principles of, and Lori, my wife, often hear me do this, and she's like, don't put that on that person. I mean, maybe go talk to the CEO. And I'm like, I know. So, but I was a little, on edge because I'd spent so much time. She was so patient with me. So at the end, I said, how did you become so patient? She had told me her age, and she's quite young. And she said, I prayed for patience. Now, I don't know about you, but what my mind went to. So that means your prayer was answered, which means you got pressed by a lot of things that challenged I was ready for kind of a war story, if you will. I didn't insert that. She said, I prayed. I said, so did it happen automatically? And she said, oh no, I've had to cooperate. That told me enough. But she said, my prayer was answered. And she said, I didn't used to be this way. But she said, I really, really am quite level. And there's a patience in me that I didn't give myself. I said, wow, can you pass some of that on to me? I'm twice your age and more. It was a wonderful conversation. And I thought, man, just to have that conversation, it made everything good about the 10 hours that I burned on trying to fix this fire alarm. So we see these little moments. They are such gifts. Thanks for letting me tell just a quick story about my impatience. Because I think 18 years, all right, maybe we'll do another podcast on what you've learned about patience. And maybe we could learn more from that because 18 years is a long time and it's still not brought to fruition. But you see progress if I'm hearing you correctly. Erika, I want to give you an opportunity. Stories from the biennial, one engagement, one conversation. You're the senior pastor. We all know that carries a lot of responsibility. There's a lot there. So, what's it like for you to go off and then come back and whatever happened there?
Yeah. It's such a gift. It's such a gift, I think, because, First Baptist Mcminnville is 158 years old. And so a lot of people have come through these doors, and a lot of those people are elsewhere now. And at the biennial, it's sort of a homecoming. Some of the organizers were talking about it as a family reunion. And so I would meet people who were part of this congregation decades ago. I talked to a man who was ordained by our congregation maybe 30, 40 years ago and talked about how that will always be, he'll always hold that in his heart. And so to see people who have passed through, who are now engaged in other places is really special, and just a reminder of how connected we are, even with folks we might not know or think about those connections with on a daily basis, but there's something that binds us. And I was to add to what Don is saying, there's that kind of long journey of the welcoming and affirming group. And a similar thing happened at this biennial there's a group called American Baptist Church's Palestine Justice Network, and they are fairly new, and they were not allowed to lead a workshop. Whoever was making the decisions denied the proposal that they offered. They didn't have official space in the exhibit hall, but another organization said who did have space, said you can bring your materials and kind of share the space that we've been allotted, so made space for them. And so just watching this movement of what gets allowed under the official rubric and what people make space for and how they make space for it anyway, even if it's not officially approved, but people say this is crucial to who we are as people of faith. And so if we're coming together, we need to be able to have conversations about how we be a church in a time when trans people are under attack, how we be a church in a time when children in Gaza are starving, how we be a church when the church's name is being used to perpetuate some of this evil. Biennial is a place to talk beyond just our congregation about that and think about what can our witness in the world be for peace and justice and love. And there are ways that conversation is discouraged. And then there are ways that it pops up anyway. And so to kind of follow those threads is a really interesting project at a gathering like this.
I really like that combination of phraseology. It's resisted against or pushed against, and then it pops up anyways. And I'm like, yeah, I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Pops up anyways.
And that's maybe even too, it maybe sounds accidental. That's a lot of work, right, on the parts of some of these organizers to make it happen.
Sure. That's great. Well, it's my responsibility to keep us on track, and I'll keep us on track with time. We've got 10, 12, 13 minutes. We could just keep going, but we got other things to do today and people listening to us. I don't think they would get tired of listening to us, but we've got to work with that time frame. What other things did you come in wanting to share? I know you spent a little time together as a group preparing. Is there anything that you would regret not saying in this space to our congregation and to other people listening, American Baptist or not? Stories? Don.
So, Doug, after one of the luncheons, I don't remember which day it was, Erika was standing next to a gentleman. You could tell that they had been friends for years. And she says, I'd like to introduce you to his first name
Wallace.
Wallace. And Wallace was the one who had sent a note to Erika back in the spring of in 2015 that there was a church in McMinnville, Oregon that was looking for a pastor, and maybe she might be interested in checking it out. And in that short conversation that we had, a lovely guy who is now a senior pastor, he said, First Baptist Church of McMinnville is a church that I dream some of the specialties of that group will become more evident in my churches. We're making great progress, but he gave both a compliment to our history, which is, years before Erika showed up on the scene, and to Erika saying, I knew she was going to be a great fit, and I said she sure is. So that's just my plug.
That's great. Tell us a little bit about your relationship before we go to Joanne. Erika, however much you want to share about your relationship with Wallace.
Oh, yeah. He's an old friend. When I was in high school, the American Baptist Churches had a program called Youth Leader Corps, and I was a youth in that program, and he was one of the young adult leaders. And so he was a real part of kind of shaping my faith as it was really, really in formation. And then we kind of reconnected, I guess 25 years later. We were both working on dissertations and became writing partners. And so both working at churches in the Kansas City area, and then also kind of plugging away at these long-term projects. And yeah, he's really encouraged me along the way. And he's done a lot of creative, he's had a church that also operated a tea shop that did fair employment and fair wages for the tea makers, and they hosted like art and poetry nights, and he's just done a lot of interesting work of like how can a church engage a community, and so kind of a mentor of mine also. Yeah.
And he pastors now where?
In Overland Park, Kansas.
All right.
Or maybe Shawnee.
Yeah, close. Maybe Wallace will listen to this and we can all say, Wallace, thank you. Thank you for that suggestion right on about Erika. I tell you, one of the things that had a significant impact on me before we go to Joanne, and she's got a story to tell about the biennial. When I first met Erika, we chatted a bit. I told her a little bit about my story, my church story, my wandering story. I think of the Beatles song, The Long and Winding Road. And it was just kind of that. Had a few cracks in the pavement, I think we've all got that. But one of the things that really meant a lot to me was Erika said to me, so you're the person that was sitting on the back row that Sunday. And the first thought was, you noticed me? I wasn't wearing a big hat or anything. I didn't have bullhorns on or anything. I just was sitting as far back as I could. And that was intentional. And that really, hopefully that doesn't put pressure on you that you always have to say that about somebody, but the fact that I was noticed in that space. Another thing that really meant a lot to me at First Baptist was I was greeted and welcomed just enough, but not too much. Just enough, but not too much. I didn't want too much. My deceased brother, I took him to a church that I attended in Seattle, and I knew it was going to be problematic afterwards. And afterwards, he said, "What in the world? That pastor just got him up in my face, tried to hug me, and whatever." And he said, "Man, that just freaked me out. Where are you going to church, man?" And I'm like, I don't really know what to say. I knew it'd be problematic. I think anything at that point would have triggered him, but I was greeted just enough. So that was beautiful. Joanne.
Thank you. So one of the things I think that has been hinted at is the joy and the pride really the American Baptists have for being, they even call themselves the most diverse denomination, that they have many different caucuses, racial caucuses, and different places, regions, associations. And one of the things that happened at this biennial is they have what's called the American Baptist Historical Society. And American Baptists have been around since 1610. So that's a long time ago. And so this particular part of the denomination has taken it upon himself to be like the official archive and to put together the history of the denomination. And so in Larry and I's experience, we got very involved with a very good friend who was American Baptist, and he was Japanese American. And he told us about his story of what happened in World War II after Pearl Harbor, when all the Japanese Americans on the West Coast were rounded up and taken away to, they called them internment camps. And I think they were incarceration camps. Anyway, they were put in an area with barbed wire and towers with soldiers with guns pointing down on them. And anyway, their story was so heartbreaking when we found out about it. And then we found out about this church called Japanese Baptist Church in the Seattle area. And the pastor, his name was Emery Andrews. And so he was a Caucasian pastor, and he got up on Sunday morning to speak to his congregation, and there was no one there because they had been taken away. And he was so upset about it that he took his whole family and moved to Twin Falls, Idaho, to minister to his family behind the barbed wire. And so the American Baptist Historical Society has been documenting that, and with pictures and things. And so Larry and I were in the exhibit area, and we come around the corner, and here is this beautiful, beautiful display of, I don't know, 8-10 feet tall, 4 boards that are standing, and they have all these pictures and all this documentation. And so another connection was made personally for us, that we had been trying to piece together these stories, and we had been trying to connect the stories of the Japanese Americans here on the West Coast and the stories of the people in Hiroshima after the atomic bomb. And so we have been working to have them share their stories together. And so here it was already, and we were so excited. And just as a follow-up, I want to just share with you, her name is Jenny that put this together, and she says, "It was so nice to meet you in Omaha. After you're interested in the exhibit and about could we get grant funds for shipping the exhibit around." So she tells me about where I can go, and now we're really excited because Linfield University is, is historically a Baptist university, and so we were thinking, oh, what a great place to bring this exhibit to show people what happened, and that the American Baptists were so dedicated to the love of people and relationships that they didn't let what happened to them stand in the way of their relationship. And it was just magic to see this all together and all put together. And we could see, pictures of people. Larry and I have been on a couple of what they call pilgrimages, when they go back to the camp that they were incarcerated on, and they talk about, their mother's experience and their experience and so forth. And so the diversity in the American Baptist denomination is incredible, and it is real.
It's beautiful. The expression or thought as I was listening to you, Joanne, and really listening to all of your stories. We definitely stand on the shoulders of those who have gone before us, don't we? And what is that passage? Is it in Romans or Hebrews? I think it's in the book of Romans. We're surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses. I remember an experience I had when I went to my first therapy appointment. I first went into the bathroom and thought, I'm going to throw up. I'm definitely going to. I was so nervous. And that person, this is back in 1982, that person is really responsible for me being in this profession of being a therapist for 35, 36 years. But I remember the first session, he was establishing some kind of family systems type of thinking. And he said, I'd like you to imagine that you look up and there's a balcony that you're surrounded by, and there's people in the balcony. And we're going to go a direction of not singing the praises of all the people in the balcony. And there could be a mixture of people up there that have blessed you and helped you form in great ways. But for the nature of what we're going to be doing today, and probably for the next however long, we're going to talk about the detrimental experiences. And I remember looking up, and I could imagine in my mind people were coming to mind, and I can't say I was comfortable with all of them looking down on me. It's just like, oh boy, okay. And that launched into talking about how I was formed. And at that point, I was, like I said, 23, 24, 25 years old, something like that. But I'm thinking about a different interpretation of this. We look up the balcony and we're surrounded by people that we maybe have never met. We've met heroes of ours, people that you still are meeting. And to think, man, what a tradition of faith of people. I mean, as you told that story, Joanne, somebody moving their whole family, just the sacrifices that are made to love. I'm just like, wow, I sure can't match those, but I can say I'm in good company. I'm in good company. So, with a few minutes left, anything else that you want to squeeze in here? This will be your last opportunity for this podcast. And you know what? Actually, maybe we'll do more of these, and we'll see where this goes. Maybe we actually do something every once in a while for other folks in the church to join. And then maybe one time I'll be traveling and I'll pass the host mic to you and let you run it, which is fun to do. Dawn, you had your hand up there.
I just wanted to make a comment to folks who might be listening to this who haven't hung out with Baptists for a while. There are lots of different kinds of interpretation of what a Baptist believes, and the media tends to pick up on one set that is pretty non-inclusive. And I just want to say that along with the Association of Welcoming and Affirming Baptists, I think we at First Baptist Mcminnville would say, we hope this is true for us. Not that kind of Baptist. It can be tricky, but there's a lot of people in our congregation who said, I tell people that I attend a Baptist church and they say, how could you? And so we have those conversations regularly. How could you? Well, there's more than one way to interpret what a Baptist acts and behaves like.
That's great. I think that maybe, unless somebody else has something that is just pushing on you and you're just so compelled to speak, Jim's going to say something to us. Yes, Jim.
When I was exploring joining First Baptist Church Mcminnville, we read a book, Churchwide, by Valerie Kaur, and it was called See No Stranger. And I think that was very impactful in my life because Valerie Kaur is a Sikh, and she, in that book, says that when you meet somebody for the first time, see them as a part of you that you don't know yet. And that had a real impact on me and has caused me to be more welcoming and more affirming and more accepting of more positions, because when I see a new person now, I think of those words, you're a part of me that I don't know yet. And I think that was one of my experiences at the biennial, that I had many encounters with people that are a part of me that I didn't know, and I know more about them now. And it was a great, wonderful, meaningful experience for me.
It's beautiful. Yeah, everybody's thumbs up. Everybody watching this, you'll see the video, thumbs up. I think that's a great way to send us off. So what I'll ask from you all is the minute I stop the recording that you don't run away yet, because we got to make sure it all uploads. It usually uploads within seconds. I had one guest. It took about 49 minutes to upload. And the person actually said, Doug, I'm sorry, I can't hang around. And I said, would you just leave your computer open if you're able to do that? And so I stared at an empty screen in the room. Why it took that long? It wasn't that far away. It's really strange. And it finally uploaded. So yours will probably, it'll say 100%. So we'll watch that. And we're not going to edit that out. We're not going to edit out much of this at all, because I just like to run it. I did a podcast recently, and about 5 minutes before or 2 minutes before we're ready to go, the host said, just wanted you to know, welcome, and I don't edit these. And I went, okay, great, let's roll. So anyways, I do a little bit of editing. So thank you so much. I think this has been a great conversation. I think people in our congregation will be strengthened and blessed. And I think there'll be other people that will listen. And maybe it will help with that church wound that so many folks carry around. There's probably a book written, but I thought if I ever attempt to write another book, which I probably won't, but I don't want to say never. The title would be, I think it would be Church Hurt. I think that might be it, but it's probably out there already. So bless you both. I say both. Bless all of you. I'm grateful for the time. Thank you for making the time. I'm going to stop and then we'll just chat for a few minutes. Thanks for listening. This has been Doug Wheeler from the Belly, and you know who we've been talking to. Oh, and by the way, we don't have any sponsors yet for this podcast. So the last podcast I did, I actually asked, I'm going to do it now. We got time. It's our podcast. I'd like you to do a shout out to a business in your locale that you just like going there and you like the people that run it. My shout out was to the Safeway here in Mcminnville, and to Brenda and Charlene, because they take such good care of my wife and I. And the Rite Aid closed in Mcminnville, so they're inundated. And man, I tell you what, I've seen 35, 40 people in line. They're so patient. They're so caring. And we need to go get what we need to get. So I did a shout out to them recently. I thought maybe one day Safeway will be one of our sponsors. You want to do a shout out, each of us? I think that would be cool. Something local that you just say, I want to give a shout out to them. I know I'm hitting you literally without any prep at all. Restaurant, place you buy your groceries, you get your gas, whatever.
Well, I think looking at Jim, I think about New Morning Bakery in Dallas, who's been really generous with the church over the years, providing pastries and sandwiches and breads to shelter program and other times when we're working to feed people. So I popped in there one time. It's delicious and friendly, and just really grateful for their generosity.
And that's New Morning Bakery in Dallas, Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where Jim currently lives. That's beautiful. So, who else? Shout out. Don.
Yes, I'd like to shout out to a small business here in McMinnville called Brilliant Northwest. They specialize in helping businesses and governments and whatnot improve or upgrade their lighting capacities in ways that saves energy and costs less and provides more. And they have been a big help to First Baptist Church in multiple ways.
Awesome. And again, that was called
Brilliant Northwest.
Brilliant Northwest. Fantastic. Larry and Joanne, and then Jim.
I'd like to give a shout out to St. Barnabas Episcopal Church for providing space for a soup kitchen 5 nights a week.
Beautiful. And Larry, one of the most humble men I've ever met. He wouldn't tell you, but he cooks there along with his son, Kyle. I've never eaten Larry's food, but man, I've eaten Kyle's food. I thought, I'm not leaving tonight. I might just stay. Is this a bed and breakfast? I think I'll just stay. We'll see what's happening in the morning. Joanne.
I'm going to pass.
That's fine. That's fine. Jim, unmute yourself there, Jim, because we want to hear from you. We want to hear that shout out. There we go.
Well, one of the places that I have frequented occasionally that I really like is the Mcminnville McMinnville's in Mcminnville. They have really some wonderful food, and I've had a couple of celebrations there. And also maybe the gallery, what is it called? Playhouse or the Gallery Theater?
The theater?
That they really put on some wonderful productions, and I'm looking forward to going again later this year.
That's great. That's great, man. That's great. All of that enriches our daily lives, doesn't it? I think Joanne she's coming in. Come on, Joanne.
I just remembered, Larry helped me remember his name. And that is at Walgreens Pharmacy on Baker Street. And there's a particular person that works there. His name is Jason. And whenever he sees us coming, he says, "Hi, Joanne and Larry." And yes, And when we go through the routine of our address, he says, "Yeah, I know."
It's good. It's good to be known.
And he's just really super kind. We always actually enjoy getting our medication there, if you can enjoy that.
Yeah, I understand. Well, that's great. That's great. Thank you all for sharing those. So we're going to say goodbye to one another and stay with us until we upload. So thanks for listening to us. Hopefully you've had as much fun as we've had, and you've learned some things that enrich your life. Thank you.